Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So let's recap what we did last time. Actually, we did more than this. We created an application and tried to practice from scratch the commands that we learned and the structure that we want in our application. So this is again an imaginary application. It's kind of a shell. It's doesn't do anything specific, but inside of that we have a module that does something specific rather than being very generic, and that's called task module. And tasks or to-do list is one of the most commonly used concept to in many tutorials, not just Angular tutorial. Anyway, we try to have a module over in our application. So we started with generating an application from Angular CLI and added the components modules as needed. And one of the first thing we did was made a change to app component or the template of app component and added an outer outlet below the app nav bar, and app nav bar component would serve as navigation bar for our application. Right now we haven't coded anything inside. All we did was generate the components that were needed, that we thought might be needed for our application as well as for our practice. So we generated a home component that would be kind of a home page for our application if no route is specified. So other routes that we generated were uh, for tasks, for the tasks module. So we lazy loaded it, not eagerly loading it. What happens in lazy loading is this module will be loaded on demand, or will the JavaScript for this module would be sent to the browser when the user tries to navigate to one of its routes. And if you look at that module, recap, this is what we have. We have the routes for this particular module and its related imports. And we generated the components that were needed for the lazy loaded module. One would be add task, and the others would be, and to edit a particular task, we have an edit task and we have a task list. So that was pretty basic. We did it, I believe, in like 10 to 15 minutes. Let's keep on doing that. Or I don't know, I'm in two minds whether to continue this or go back to our application and allot the final 15 minutes to get back to practice. Okay. Let's get back to this application, our application that we were working along all the way, and try to have new concepts over there. So one of the concepts that I was planning on introducing today, I had my OneNote updated, but somehow I think I lost my changes. I don't know what happened. Let me just open Notepad and kind of make a quick note on what I plan to do today. Let's look at routing. We already looked at routing a little bit, but this will be uh, not a plain routing, but routing with parameters in it, or routing, passing data using the routing. So we'll do this extensively. Do we have an edit product over here? Product. We have a single product. We don't have an edit product. Let me generate an component. ng generate component at component slash product management. Dry run. So while it runs that command, let me just go over this particular line. So we have a constructor. Basically, all classes have constructors in object-oriented programming languages. And for that constructor, we are trying to inject something. In this case, we are trying a title service, trying to inject a title service from the title service provided by Angular itself, and one a product service that was written by ourselves. Right? This is called dependency injection. Basically, we are telling, or in other words, this class is asking, okay, for me to do my operations, whatever is coded inside me, I need these two things provided to me in the constructor. So this is called constructor dependency injection, or injection in the constructor. So dependency injection is of two, can be done in three ways. One is constructor basically provide in the constructor the dependencies, or the other two ones are property injection and method injection. I mean, they are all the same concept, but it's just the place where we are providing the dependencies that this particular class is dependent on. So it doesn't have to be just the Angular services that could be provided as a dependency. It can be anything. It can be anything that is injectable. So if you go to the product service, and while we were discussing the services, the first time around we did talk about this injectable. So this injectable decorator makes it a candidate to be injected or eligible to be injected anywhere. So if we provide a token, that injectable token on something, that is a candidate that could be injected. Okay. So now going back to our command with dry run, it looks like everything is good. No, it's not good. It created a product management component, which we don't want. We want an added product component. So even though just for the explicitness and sake of easily being identifiable a component, I just added or suffixed everything with a product, like ag product or products. We don't even need this product suffix because it's under product management module. It is kind of redundant, but let's go with the flow which we already decided. But I think the better design would have been under product management, just edit, view, something like that. But this was for demonstration purposes, and uh, you can use your creativity and imagination to come up with much better organization, inshallah. So I want this edit product component to be generated under product management, and I believe this is what I want. Yep. A new folder for edit product, and all the component stuff goes under there. I'll take out the dry run flag and execute that. So meanwhile, to get to the edit product component, we need to have a route. I'll just start ngserve. Oops. I don't know why I hit R at the end of ngserve. Okay. ngserve, and from the product listing component, where we are displaying the products, we need a link that we could route to our edit product component. So the product component at this point of time is just passing the buck off to the product component, and product component is actually taking care of displaying it however it wants. So with various techniques, we could have just displayed using ng-for and list over here or a table over here, but we just passed the buck off. I think we have another example over here, right? I know. We used to have it, probably I did cleaned it up. Anyway, so from over here, we need a link that would route to our new edit component. So a href should work, but last time it didn't. We can always switch to router link, but we can troubleshoot why href is not working if it is not working. So what do we need here? Okay, we need the route edit product. Just have edit over here, and then we need the ID of the product. Product dot ID. Just have the word edit. So in the product management module, we need a route for that. We already have it. No. And that needs an ID. So this is how we define a route that has some parameters along with it. Add didn't have anything because it's a new. We are giving the user capability to add a new product, so it doesn't make sense to have any parameters over here. But maybe it does, depending on our situation. One situation that I can think of is if there are users with different roles and we want the component or the edit component needs that information. We can one way to pass that information might be add slash the role of that particular user that is logged in. But there might be scenarios where even passing something to add component will make sense, but in our case it doesn't. So that's why it's plain add without any parameters. But edit the ID is a must because we need to know, or the component needs to know what it is editing actually. So we have the route, we have we have it mapped to the right component, and in navbar, do we need to make any changes? No, because we are editing a particular product. Navbar doesn't know which product it is that is currently loaded, so it doesn't make sense to build that intelligence even if we could in the navbar itself. So we don't have to do anything to the navbar. So we have the route ready, and let's go to our new component, because whatever needs to be done outside of this component, I believe is taken care of. If not, then we'll come back. But so we talked about the injecting a dependencies. One of the things that could be injected is a route, which is present in activated route. Basically, as soon as this route or the user tries to go to this route using that edit button, that route is activated route at this point of time. At that point of time, and to get anything out of that activated route, basically at this point we need that ID. So route, this route. Property route. Just complaining that it's not recognizing. Okay. Dot route. It has a property called snapshots. There are other ways to get that, but this is one of the ways. Snapshot dot params of whatever you passed in from over there. So this is ID. the name of that parameter. That's what we use. If we had used something else like product ID or just PID, that's what we have to use over there as the identifier. So now that we have that product ID, let me have a property internally over here. ID equals to ID of type number. We don't know the ID yet, and in the ng on init hook, we'll initialize this ID to whatever we obtained from the activated route. So ID equals to this. Go get the ID from the route. So this dot ID, and let's open the browser and see if our app is ready and how ready it is. Localhost. We have a product. We have edit link ready. Add plus at the end of it. So let's see why it did. We will not do anything except console logging that ID just to make sure if we got that ID right. Oops. I think this is the old error. Let me try again. Oops. So this is not the old error, this is something relevant to us. Cannot match any routes and it's /1. Check the route once. So it should be product slash edit. Let me check why it is not product slash edit and instead just edit. Okay. So we corrected the route. Now we have the correct edit too. Now it should be one. So basically after this, this is same as once you get the ID, it's same as add product. I mean, with respect to the functionality of it, basically we try to okay, go to the product service and grab that particular product. So for that we need to inject our service. Yes, product service. Like this. So this dot product service dot get that particular product that should accept the ID that we just got from the route and initialize our product, this dot product, which we need to define. So what I meant when I said that now this is same as add product is, let me split these so that I'm able to make a better point. So add product and then edit product. What's wrong with this? Okay, this is an observable, so we cannot just assign it to an observable, or we need to make it an observable of product. So from the HTTP client or the calls to HTTP client, that's what we get, observable, not the actual value of the product. So that's what it is complaining about, and which is right. Observable. So the good practice when we have an observable variable is have a trailing dollar after the variable name. Okay. Now that is taken care of. So once we have that product, all we need to do is, instead of leaving those fields blank, we need to populate the fields with the product's properties. So from now on, it will be same. It will be same. Will not generate an ID because this ID is generated. I mean, there will be a few differences, but with respect to the filling of the form and validating the form, mostly the things will be same. So what is not same, we'll focus on that. So now that this is ready, and we'll need some kind of UI on this particular edit product component, which we'll try to build over here. So open edit product component template, and yeah, we'll come back to edit product component for a different purpose so that we don't repeat ourselves. Let's go back to the add product component and try to work so with some other controls. Right now, what we had over there is add product, just a couple of text fields. So instead of just using text fields, we'll try to use other controls like drop down list and probably a checkbox, and mostly, I mean, they follow the same pattern. So if we just look a couple more, it will generate some more confidence in us with respect to the form. So, and the way we are using these forms is called template driven forms, and for edit component we'll use a different methodology, or which is called reactive forms, so that we don't do the template forms two times and reactive forms two times. So for add we'll do the template forms, and for edit we'll try to do the reactive forms. So but before that, for add we'll try to use different controls, not just a text box. So let's change our product shape or the definition of our product class a little bit, so that we will be ready to use different controls on that. So add product component is over here. Let me have it ready. Close others, and add product component class, that was HTML. This is subscript class, and instead of brand being a string, I'll introduce the brands that this particular shop supports. So export class brand, same ID, which is number, and it will have a name which will be of type string. It is taken care of. Now we'll strongly type brand. Instead of being a string, we'll say it will be a type of brand. Same product service. So if that is the case, if the brand is not a free form text, then that means, yeah, there is a question over here. It's asked between reactive form, difference between reactive forms and template driven forms. We'll come to that when we get to the reactive forms. We'll talk about the differences and go from there and start working on reactive forms. So for the product service, when the brands are strongly typed, most likely that means the brand should come from the database. So we maintain the brands in the database too. So for that, we need to go to the database and actually fetch it. And that is the job of our product service. So right now it's already complaining, okay, brand cannot be just a free form text. It should be. So before even going there, we'll have to expose a method that would get in a similar fashion. We hard coded products. Will do the same with the product brands too. Get it will return an observable of brand observable. The spelling is right. I don't know what. It says we haven't written a code that we need to return something. So what did we do with the product? We do the same over here. This time it will be brand, not a product. So I need to make appropriate changes. This will be a brand B1. And one thing that I'm doing this live instead of having some files and this kind of coding or what you say dirty work prepared before starting this session is, I mean, when when I was like when I actually take the courses, I want the the teacher to do the mistakes that I might do professionally in my career, because that will generate a confidence that in me that okay, these kind of things are okay. So that is the reason I'm not preparing all these files, all these methods. I could have easily done and showed it to you guys, but when I do the same thing, I mean, I go through these typos and little bit spelling mistakes and trying to fix just to show that it is natural, that happens, and we just fine with it. Don't get frustrated. We need little bit patience in taking care of those. So now we instantiate a brand instead of a product. We need to have a property called brands. That's taking care of. Some of the errors should go away. Still complaining about cannot find any name brand. Add all missing imports. No, we have brand. Still complaining about something. Any is not assignable to brand. Okay, I think when I did that, just fine. The observable any is not assignable to type observable brand. Okay, so it should be an array, not a singular brand. Now that is fixed. Just something is still wrong. Okay, because we made a brand strongly typed thing instead of a string, it's complaining all over wherever we have brand initialized. So we need to change the values to over here. Lenovo is brand one. Now let's have it as a brand two. So what brand it is now? we'll have to find out from. This dot get brands. We are initializing, so we need to get brands from the database, which we are trying to mimic over here. Subscribe data. This dot brands equals to whatever we get as data. So I'm just using a shortcut like last time I told you. Whenever you subscribe, have three methods right away. I did not do this time because maybe I'm getting a little bit comfortable, but I think we will be better served at least initially to have all those written right away. Console dot error, write that error, and then complete. Do nothing, but at least until we get very familiar, keep on writing that. Console dot error, comma. So basically, with subscription or observables are subscribed, and when they are subscribed, we use this subscribe method, and that method takes three lambdas, three methods. One is called next method, which will be on success of that particular call, we get the data back. And the second one is error method, and the third one is complete. So we get an error, we just log, and when it is complete, if something needs to be logged, then that could if something is to be taken care of on complete logic, then that could be written over here. Anyway, we have brands over here. We got the brands. This dot brands equals, so I don't even need this. I just have our own this method's own brands. So we have brands, and let's go grab the brands dot filter. This is not how it is done. We already initialized the brands over here. Instead of this dot brands, I'll have a local brand, constant brands, brand of a brand array. Let's try this. JavaScript, that's C sharp, not JavaScript, so I change it back to or TypeScript in this case. So brands equals to, so this is constant, it will not let me do that. It should be let, so that the difference between constant and let. Constant, I told the compiler over here that this will never be changed, but I tried to change over here. That's what it is complaining about. So I change it to let. Now I can change this particular variable brands and assign it to something else. So brand dot filter b dot name should be equals to Lenovo. So that's the brand I'm assigning it to. Instead of filter returns an array. Let me go for find. If it finds something, then good enough, it will be assigned a brand, else it will be null. So which is fine, that is what I want. So I want the same thing for the other product too. Instead of Lenovo, now I want to find Dell and assign it to this product. So we should be good and without errors in this file. There might be other errors in other files wherever we are assigning something. So over here, oops, not over there, over here, we have a brand, and I'll just assign it instead of empty string, I'll make it null. Okay. One more plus. Products component, add default product. So for default product, I'll just say I'll need the brands because we are not hard coding anymore, or at least hard coding in one place, not all over the place. So maybe we'll need to query the product service to get the brands and then assign something. So I'll not go there for the moment because this is trivial, and I'll just leave it over here as null. That's, I commented it out. That's as good as sending it as null. So that's good enough. Let's keep going. Add product. Okay, now everything looks good. Let's check in the browser. Okay, most likely it refreshed and it gave us the right thing. Okay, that's what it looks like. Now brand cannot be an empty string anymore. So what do we need for that? Because brand is selectable, the user needs to be select from a list of options, and the kind of control that we need over here is a drop down. So let's add a drop down over here. So let me just keep the text box too, in case I need to copy paste something. That would help me out. So I need a label, and this label is for product brand. I'll just write brand, drop down. Select. This is a select list, and for ng model to work, we always need a name. Without name, it will throw an error, and when it does, the error would be descriptive enough for us to know. So try to remember that. If not, then error would tell you anyway that name is missing from that particular control that you are trying to use ng model on. So we have this, and for this we need options. For option, we need to repeat these options. So what is the directive that we need to use? ng for. ng for, and ng for works like let option from product, we need brands on this product. So okay, sorry, from brands, but we don't have a property brands in the product itself, and we need to have that, and on top of that we need to query the service to get the brands from the database. Anyway, let's write the code for this, and then we'll go and go to the component class and try to code this particular property and load it. So for each brand, what do we need? We need to show the brand name over here. I'll just name one brand name. So name of the brand, so that the user can identify. We can use brand name plus ID, or ID plus name, or anything, any distinguishing characteristics that the user might be able to figure out, okay, what exactly I'm trying to select. So anyway, from it's off. So let option, or let brand of brands. Now we don't have brands property over here. We need brands property. Brands, which will be of type, or which will be empty array to begin with. If we don't want an empty array and want it null, then that's fine too. Let's go with empty array just to avoid those empty array errors. So ng on init, we get the brands and we store it in our brands property. So this dot brands, not like that, because we are querying the service. This dot product service dot get brands. Okay, and then we subscribe. We don't have to subscribe, or we don't even need an array, because we can use the other style of consuming an observable. So we'll just do that. That would be a good practice too. And these are the brands, and for that we need the best practice says use a dollar trailing symbol for the observable. So if you had products or brand array, then we need to subscribe, and then in the next method of the subscribe or the first method of the subscribe, we need to assign the brand product to the data that is coming in. But with observables, this gives us observable, and that is what we are trying to have over here. So we don't even have to subscribe. We just say this dot brands dollar equals to. It's not liking it. Not assignable to brand. Okay, I keep making the same mistake. It should be an array, not a standalone brand. So now that is fixed. What we need to do over here is use the async pipe. Async. This is pipe. We talked about it last time. We tried to use async. We'll get into pipes and its details later on. But right now, this is called a pipe, and we are saying that this pipe is type of async. So async pipe is a must on observable if you want to use it in the template. So we have this brands dollar. There is no brands property, so that's what the error is probably about. Yeah, we have one more error. Name does not exist. So this should be brand.name, not just name. Now we see our drop down as well as the values inside them. Similarly to when it was a text box, we need to bind it to someone, bind it to some property, and the same way with text box, we were binding whatever the user was typing in the brand of the product property that we had over here. So we already had a product property that would be an encapsulation of the product properties itself, whatever the user is trying to enter. So let's have the same thing over here. Just now over here, now there is no concept of being required or not, right? When it was a free form text, the user might not enter anything over here and then just try to submit. That's a different case. It's a different matter that we disable the submit button until the form is valid itself. But with respect to drop down, if you are not loading any empty element or a null element for the ease of user, and if you are defaulting to the first element itself, there is no concept of required. So we can just take out the required validation from over here. But if we want to provide an empty, I mean, it depends on the design, and most of the time we are required to provide an empty option over here up front, so that nothing is defaulted and the user by mistake doesn't add a product for brand Lenovo when the user is not intending to. So it might be a mistake prone if the user is not alert. So the requirement might be okay, have a default empty element rather than defaulting it to some element, like in this case Lenovo, so that the user doesn't inadvertently add an unintended product. So in that case, we still need the required validation. Okay. Now that is taken care of. I'll just have the required validation just in case it is needed here itself. But I'll not bother about adding an empty empty brand to that list. So Anyway, I mean, just to demonstrate the concept, we already took care of required. So it works the same way with respect to select to. Now that is taken care of. It's not, which is good. It's not defaulting, so which is fine. It is unless I select. Let me enter something over here. Now the name is valid, but the brand is not. Now it is valid. Now I can submit one product. Even though we have two products right now and two brands, let me just introduce one more brand quickly. It should take a lot of time. A new brand though. Now oops, I got two apples instead of one. Okay, it should be P3, not P2. And the ID should be 3. It should push P3. Okay. And then let me introduce one more property. I don't know, I just want a Boolean property. I can't think of any, but I want to use a checkbox too, just like we used a drop down list. So for that, let me introduce something like is fragile Boolean. So same thing when we get a product, so we need to initialize. I mean, because it is a Boolean, it will be initialized to false or no. In JavaScript and TypeScript, it will be initialized to null, not false. In other languages, it will be initialized to false. But anyway, this is complaining fragile is declared here. So I'm saying of type Boolean. We actually don't bother about assigning it to Boolean. By default, make it false. I mean, there was an error which could be fixed, but right now, let's move forward by having a default property. Anyway, this is declared here. I don't know what it's trying to say. It is declared. Okay. Okay. It's gone anyway. Okay. So let me default it to false so that I don't have to go and I don't have to deal with null values. So by default it's false, and if it is false, everything else is false too. But add product, I don't have to go to the product service and then add that property because I defaulted it to false. So that was the advantage. Otherwise, it would have been null, and I would have to take care of handling those null values. So for checkbox, obviously we need an input of type checkbox. Input of type checkbox, and the ng model. Let's copy it from here so I don't have to type. Again, the required concept will not apply to the checkbox because it's either on or off. It doesn't have any null state. Or fragile. So we write the property back to the property fragile of the product using ng model. Yes, that should be enough. Now we need a label for that. I need a name. So I'll just have a name and ID is same, just like what I have been doing. Okay. It's not the greatest form, but it will work. Let's have a look at the products, what we have. We have a laptop, a more laptop, oops, displaying some object instead of, oh yeah, we need to fix that. Now the product brand is not a string anymore. We need to go fix over there, but we'll come back to that in just a bit, and we'll add a product called 3. We'll select a brand and we'll mark it as fragile. The product was added, and let's see. And now we have Apple. And we did not display the property fragile over there, so we'll. Okay, we have a question over here. In what case it will be true? When the user explicitly marks it as true or fragile, it will be true. By default, it will be false. Actually, let me go back and then make it true by default, and let's see what happens. So now it is true. If you could just look at the add product thing, it should have been checked by default because it was true. So let me try to troubleshoot what's going on. But before troubleshooting, let's actually fix the product listing and add the newly defined properties over there. Product component, we need product.brand.name over here, and then we need if it is fragile or not. Products cannot read the name of the property undefined. So basically what is happening over here is when we are getting the products, we are not giving the brands back. So product service, we need to change that to we are getting the brand back. Okay. So for the moment, I'll just comment that brand out because he giving the error, but it's just about most likely trying to figure out what went wrong over there. But this is good. Product.brand product will have a brand and it will have a name. That is what we are trying to display. So we'll troubleshoot that later and try to fix it, something, fix the other things. Product dot fragile. Okay. Because I explicitly said it prior, it's false over here. So right now, if I don't set that property, it will complain. But if we just ignore the complaint for a bit, it should have been defaulted to true because I defaulted it to true over here. Console.log this dot product dot dot fragile. I think most likely because I did not do a new. It went back to complaining about that property is missing. Because it is missing. So instead of doing that, let me just do add. Instead of initializing the product using the object returner notation, let me do a new product. Okay. Okay. Now it is defaulted to. So if the user wants to add a product that is not fragile, then that's what the user needs to check it off. So in that case, it will be not what the default value is. So now that's taken care of. Uh, let's try to fix this. Not in the property of name undefined. So brand it says is undefined. If it is the brand is not there, this is kind of null safe operator. So when you put a question mark right after something, if it is null, it will ignore everything else after that. It will not display anything. So just to get rid of that error, I put a question mark and also to introduce that little concept. If it is null, then everything else after that is ignored, and if it is not, then the name will be evaluated and displayed over there. So anyway, that will take the error out, but it will not display anything. It is displaying something for the second product and not the first product. So might be a typo in the product service itself where I was trying to set something. Okay, this is what I did. I copied and pasted from here to here, but I forgot to change the P1 to P2. So that is what was happening. P2's brand was never set. Now we see both the brands, brand dot name. So that is fixed. Add product. Let me add a product that is fragile. Let me name 3 Apple, and then I'll add one more. So normally the best practice is to clear the values. We'll try to work on it and how to clear the values, but yeah, let's try to work on it some other time. Right now, let's add a couple of products. One is fragile and one is not, and let's go back to product listing and see. Okay, I see something wrong over here. 4 got added twice. Okay, product. We'll do 2 separate operations. Fragile. We have 2. This is not final. 3 is fragile and 4 is not. So that works, but I mean the best practice, like I said, is to clear the value. So maybe because I did not clear the value, something else is happening over there, and we are getting uh, duplicate products added. So we'll take care of it maybe in the next session. Let's we have some few more minutes. I don't know if it is prudent enough to go back to app 3 and continue practice over there. But let's recap what we did today. Here using the Git comparison tool. So we introduce a new route in our product management module called edit product component, and we passed on the ID of the product that is being edited that we intend to edit onto that route. And how does the route or the component consume that particular ID from that route is using an activated route injected into that component. So this is a brand new, it doesn't have anything to compare on the left. We just open the file. So how to consume that is using this dot route, and that route is an instance of an activated route class. It has lot of things. I believe we could get that same ID property in different ways. Snapshot dot params or query params. So most of the, you might see if you are looking at the Angular tutorials, you might see different approaches to get the same ID. Take this out, and to get the product using the same ID, because we are editing that particular product, we use the product service to get that particular product, and we store it in an observable. We could use observable, or we can just subscribe to this get product method and have another property over here, which would be the product that is being edited, and assign the data coming out of that subscription to this particular product. And next we went back to add product. We'll come back to edit product and implement the edit product form using the reactive forms, which is a different methodology in Angular. And what we have used for add product is called template driven forms, because we are defining the template and the controls and the validation in the product, in the template itself. So all our logic, the controls is in the template. That's why it's called template driven forms. We use ng model to write to the relevant properties on the component class. And once it is ready, once the submit is clicked, we use or we bind it to the form submit. And even in reactive forms, that's what we do. We don't have to do ng just submit over here. We can do ng submit, which is like Angular's little bit addition to the plain submit. Both should work. So anyway, and the validation is provided in the template itself. So right now our validation is pretty simple. Let's say if it was a user form or user registration form, where we'll have a username, and we might want to enforce a minimum length and maximum length, which we did for the product name over here. So that could be implemented, and for the user registration, most likely we'll ask the user for the email address. So the user, for us to validate, we need to provide a regular expression that would match the email address as valid, because the user might just enter ABC, and then we cannot just let the user enter that ABC and store it in our database, which would be an invalid email. So if email is the attribute, to mark it as okay, make sure that this particular control or the value in that control is a valid email. So things like that can be enforced in the template itself. So that's an example of different validation. And similarly, there is a phone number. Similarly, there is uh, there might be a lot of validation. That's what I'm trying to say. Or in case of resetting of password, or when the user tries to register, the common practice is to ask the user for the password twice, just to make sure that the user knows or did not make a typo if asked once. So, and the validation needs to compare both the passwords and make sure they are the same. So that's a different style of validation or kind of validation that could be enforced, and all that validation is enforced via this template itself, and that's why they are called template driven forms. Anyway, that's what we use for addition of a product, and for the edit we'll try to use reactive forms. And some companies, they have a rule that never use template driven forms, and I don't know if that is enforceable or not, or it's a good idea, because for simple forms we don't have to go through the trouble of writing those in the component itself, and this could be done easily. Anyway, for me, this is easier than that, than the reactive forms. Template driven forms are easier, and they are async, while reactive forms are not. So let's not dwell in the differences right now. This is note to myself, and let's try to recap what's left out there. So for the we introduced new properties just to use different controls and see how they could be used. So the particularly interesting was the select option. So we write the select template over here, select control, and for the options we need to repeat what's coming out of the database. So for that we used a brands observable, and that will be populated as an observable of brands from the product service. And we used async pipe to actually read that observable. The advantage of using async pipe in the template and observable of brands of or of anything using the async pipe is we don't have to explicitly unsubscribe from the subscription to that observable, because async pipe will take care of it for us. And that happens when the component is unloaded. And we also introduce one Boolean property just to make use of the checkbox. So we already used input type as text. Now we use input type of checkbox, and similarly we can use radio button or the color. Color would have been a good example, but maybe you can try it as an exercise. So just input of type color, and product, introduce a property called product or color to the product class, and try to populate that property in the add product form and display it in the product list. So that would be a good exercise. So I guess that's it for now. If you have any questions, feel free again to ask me via the group or in our session tomorrow. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.